When we join a small group, we have high hopes. We have standards and expectations that we consciously and sometimes unconsciously keep. And sometimes we can lean so heavily on our group to actually meet those expectations that the group can take the place of God in our lives. Today, we're going to ask a question together. Has my group become an idol for me? Let's dive in. Hey guys, I'm Steve and this is Level Up, the monthly dose of leadership training that will help you take your next level group to the next level. So, how do we know if our group has become an idol? Well, before we answer that question, let's answer the bigger question, what actually is an idol? I don't know about you, but when I think of an idol, I think of this, or this, or this. And those kinds of idols feel kind of, in a way, far off from the Western culture that I'm a part of. I mean, I haven't driven down the road and seen a golden calf statue in the past few years. I don't know if you have. So what actually is an idol? Well, the Bible helps us with this question. God, in Exodus chapter 20, says this, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness, or anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God." So first it says this, you shall not make for yourself. When we idolize something, there's this element of human control, of us taking things into our own hands, of kind of becoming the controller or the creator even, you can think of it. And at the root then of our idolatry is pride. It's us. It starts with the belief that we don't need God, we can do it ourselves. And so, when we engage in idolatry, what we're doing is we're kicking God out of His rightful place on the throne of our hearts. But then later on in the verse, it says something else. It says, "You shall not bow down to them." That is the things that were created. So the second part of idolatry is that we're not just kicking God off the throne of our hearts, but we're actually putting something else in His place. I was installing a door at my place a few months ago, and the door frame had some holes already in it from the previous door where the hinges were. And these holes were where the hinge screws were going to go that I was for the door that I was installing. So I started installing each of these hinges using the right size screws, and it was working out pretty fine, but then I just ran into this issue. And so I decided that what I was going to do was use an extra large screw in place of the correct size screw. And I thought, hey, that's going to hold the door on better, fix my problem maybe, right? But in reality, what happened was that putting in that extra large screw actually just totally messed the hole up that the screw goes in. So now the screw is too big and it doesn't even allow the door to close properly. I put that screw in a place that it didn't belong. I replaced the right size screw with this too large, inadequate screw. And isn't that what we do with God when we feel like He isn't living up to our standards, or things aren't going right, or maybe He feels like an inconvenience in the moment? We replace Him. Sometimes we replace Him with food or sports or with media, but sometimes we replace Him with people, maybe people in our small group. And the truth is that anything we replace God with is subpar. The replacement will always fail us. The idol will never deliver what God can deliver. So that's idolatry. But how do we know if our groups have become an idol for us? Well, the trouble is that sometimes we don't actually realize that our groups have become an idol in our hearts until the realities of that idolatry just hit us smack in the face. So as a way of preventing that and preparing, here are two ways that our groups could become idols in our lives, and hopefully some helpful questions for you to ask to prevent that. Way number one is dependence. Part of the vision of being in a next level group is that as a group, we would be able to lean heavily on one another, sharing our deepest struggles and carrying one another through those struggles together. There's this level of interdependence that is good and biblical and necessary for us to grow in deep spiritual friendship. And we are right to pursue that wholeheartedly together. But there's also this potential for our dependence upon the people in our group to actually replace our dependence upon God. If you start to notice that you're depending less upon God, going to Him less in prayer, going to read the scriptures less, leaning and relying on Him throughout your day less, and instead you notice that your default is to go to your group, in fact that your group is kind of beginning to become the only place that you go to for help, then I think a red flag should go up in your mind, in our minds. And the question should be asked, who am I truly dependent upon? Has my group taken God's place in my life? And a good way to know whether your group has taken the place of God in your heart is to observe how you respond when someone in your group lets you down. When someone consistently doesn't respond to your attempts at friendship or your texts or your emails, for example, or doesn't attend group or doesn't do the assignment for weeks and weeks in a row, never shares, rarely engages, or maybe does something personally to you that feels damaging or offensive. How do you feel when that happens? Do you feel like it's the end of the world, like your world is over, like you've got nowhere to go, nobody who cares, nobody who loves you? Or do you run to your Savior, who's all sufficient, to meet your every need, who loves you deeply as the perfect Father, friend, and Savior who will never abandon you? So that's number one, dependence. At your core, who are you most depending on? God or your group? Way number two is our dream. Let me explain. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wisely said, "He who loves his dream of a Christian community more than the Christian community itself becomes a destroyer of the latter." He's saying that if we love our vision for perfect community more than we love the people in the community itself, we're totally missing the point. So in this case, what is the idol? The idol is our love for a perfect community. We've put that dream for a perfect community in the place of God, so much so that when someone in our groups gets in the way or slows things down, that process of us growing to become a better community, they become more of an obstacle. We see them as an obstacle rather than an image bearer. When we idolize our dream of community, we are sacrificing the people that God has called us to love on the altar of that dream. A good way to know whether or not this is happening in your life is to take a good look at your thoughts. When someone in your group disagrees with you or does something that slows down or comes in the way of the group's growth, what do you think? Do you think this person is wrong and next week I'm going to convince them of that? Or I wish this person would just change their perspective, follow through for once, pull themselves together? Or do you think, Lord, I'm frustrated with this person, but I want to love them as Christ first loved me. I want to lay my life down for them. I want to be a shepherd for them, gently coming alongside and encouraging them. Here's the instruction that the Apostle Paul gave us to help us deal with these situations. He said this: walk in all humility, with gentleness and patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Way number two is our dream. What's more important to you, having the perfect community or actually loving the people in that community? Can I be honest with you for a second? I have sinned against the people in the groups that I've been a part of in both of these ways, dependence and dream. And I've had to do a serious searching of my heart, confessing of my sin to God and the group, as well as repenting and moving forward in a different way. And I still fall short sometimes in my thinking and in my action. When God allowed me to realize that I was putting my group in His rightful place, it was an extremely difficult emotional experience. It felt like someone had melted down my golden calf and made me drink it. Like someone had shattered my dream. But honestly, that shattering turned out to be a gift from God, because through it, He reminded me of how He was everything that I needed. And I pray that He would remind you of the same. So, as you lead your group, would you ask yourself these questions? First, in what ways could I be putting my group in the place of God? And how can I turn away from that back to full dependence upon God for everything that I need? Thank you so much for your faithful leadership of your group. Your passionate pursuit of biblical community is inspiring. Don't give up. this passion. We love you and appreciate you. Bless you guys.